Good morning on this Saturday morning, February the 27th, and this will be our last devotion of the theme this week of this transitional week for Jesus and the disciples. They're learning a lot as Jesus gets much more focused on the cross, not just for himself, which of course his cross is much different than ours, but we're not saving anybody by taking up our crosses, but he's trying to get them to understand what his kingdom is about. And today's devotion comes from Mark chapter 10, verses 35 to 45 is the suggested reading. And the verse at the top is from that passage. As I said, it's greatness in the kingdom of God. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. If you ever get a chance to read the book, The Upside Down Kingdom, I encourage you to get it and read it because it focuses on this kind of truth, that the kingdom of God is so much different from what the kingdoms of this world are after and what they find valuable. When James and John, the sons of Zebedee, stood before Jesus, the antithesis between them was almost total. He had come to give and to serve. They wanted to get and to rule. The same choice faces us today. Firstly, there is the choice between self-seeking and self-sacrifice. James and John said to Jesus, "We want you to do for us whatever we ask," in verse 35. Their request surely qualifies for inclusion in the Guinness Book of Records as the worst prayer ever prayed. I've read it once. I laughed harder when I read it that first time. The Guinness Book of Records, the worst prayer ever prayed. For blatant self-centeredness, it would be hard to beat. They anticipated that there would be an unholy scramble for the best seats in the kingdom, so they judged it prudent to make an advance reservation. Their prayer was an attempt to bend God's will to theirs, whereas true prayer involves the surrender of our will to God's. Secondly, there's the choice between power and service. They asked Jesus if they might sit on each side of him in the kingdom. What were they expecting to sit on? The floor? Cushions? Stools? No, surely on thrones. They came from a middle-class family with servants to do their bidding. Perhaps they missed them and wanted to regain power to rule. In the world, Jesus commented, their great men exercise authority over them. But it is not this way among you. The new community of Jesus is organized on a different principle: service, not power; humility, not authority. Thirdly, there is the choice between suffering and security. In leaving home and following Jesus, James and John had become vagrants. Did they regret leaving their comfortable home? In reply to Jesus' question, they claimed they could share his cup and his baptism, for they thought he was referring to the luxuries of the messianic banquet, whereas he was alluding to suffering and the way of the cross. Thus, James and John coveted honor, power, and safety, while Jesus offered sacrifice, service, and suffering. With his dramatic words, "Not this way among you," Jesus indicated that there are two distinct communities in the world with two distinct value systems. The symbol of one is the throne, but of the other, the cross. Those are penetrating words, and especially in our day and in our culture, I think. It's hard not to say things that some people may take the wrong way, but I think the church is not called to authority in the world. We cannot make people be Christians through law, through mandate. Just as those who would try and take our rights in America away from Christians and away from the church, they cannot stop us being Christians. The church has grown and blossomed most in places where there was persecution. It was that way in the early church for the first 300 years. The church lived under persecution. Israel lived under slavery and persecution. The church in China has more Christians than we have in our country. Even with all of our freedoms, they have blossomed and grown and become deeply committed to Christ through difficulty. And so we dare not fool ourselves into thinking that our Christian experience will be better if we hold power. It is not that way in Jesus' kingdom. It is not that way in Jesus' kingdom. Think about these things. Pray on these things. Read that passage in Mark that he suggests for this one, Mark 10:35 through 45. In these last days before the cross, Jesus has this pressing need to teach his disciples what his kingdom really is about and what it really looks like. Let's not forget it. Let's not forget it. We are servants. I love the three choices he lays out for us there. The choice between self-seeking and self-sacrifice, the choice between power and service, and the choice between suffering and security. I would even change that "and" to verses. Between self-seeking versus self-seeking versus self-sacrifice, power versus service, suffering versus security. We need to learn the rules of citizenship in the kingdom of heaven. I pray that's a passion and a desire for us all. Blessings to you today.